Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Pub. It is now episode 14, and of course, I'm joined by the usual suspects. Both Jack and Reese are sitting here to chew the fat over the last couple of months in ME7. Yes, gentlemen, welcome. Hope you're both well.
All good, thanks, mate. How about you?
Not too bad, until we start talking about the last couple of months, which haven't been ideal. Reese, you good?
Yeah, good, mate. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, last episode was recorded on the 6th of September, and I think Gills had a record back then of played 5, won 3, drew 1, lost 1 in the league. They'd scored 6 and conceded just twice. They had 10 points at 2 points per game. It has not quite been as plain sailing since then. So from that date to today, played 10, won 4, drawn 1, lost 5, scored and conceded 10, points 13 at 1.3 PPG to give us a total of 23 points for the season so far. We currently sit 8th in League Two. I'll come to you first, Jack. How do we assess where we are as it stands now? Because it's almost like the season's been broken down into 2 sections, isn't it? There's that first month or so we were very, very good, and it's fair to say not quite so much recently.
Yeah, it's been a strange old season, mate. I think to be honest, it's followed a very similar pattern to last year, actually. Probably not quite as pronounced in terms of the drop off, but if you look back to when Harris left and when Clements came in, I think we were broadly in a similar position, weren't we? And we went on a losing run after having won our opening few games. So at the start of the season, although I was very happy with what had happened, in the back of my head I was thinking something this may happen again, like, based on how last season went. So I think for me it's just, at the moment, anyway, we're on course for a similar points tally to last season, based on the amount of games played. If you tot it all up, it works out fairly similar. We've got the same players, in my opinion, and we're probably coming on to something that we could be talking more on, but, just as a super summary, we've got a lot of the same players who don't seem up for it. We've got, we're still scoring a goal a game or less than a goal a game, and we're still not coming from behind still. In games. So all of the same problems that have been there over the last few seasons seem to be there now. So in summary, I guess, it's not horrendous. We're 8th, we're 4 points off second and 1 point off the playoffs. It's not disastrous, but the last few months have been pretty disastrous because of just how well the start of the season was. So if we were, if we'd have started the season extremely poorly and we'd won the last 5 or 6 games, we'd all be feeling really good about ourselves. That being said, 8th is probably not the position that any of us want to be in at this point because, as I say, it's got similarities to last season, so we don't want it to go the same way.
Reese, anything to add? I was just quickly trying to work out this. Sorry, I was listening, just trying to work it out. Yeah, 64 points we got last season at 1.39. So that gave us, 64 points last season. At the moment, we're on for 70. So probably not enough to get us in the playoffs unless we have a lower tally required like we did last season, which we still failed to make up. But 33% of the way through, Reese. So how do you see it? I've written down, are we underachieving based on the quality of players that we brought into the squad and have in the squad? Are we overachieving based on the fact that we've had an injury crisis that's now gone on for the best part of 3 months? That might be an excuse, or are we somewhere in the middle?
I'd probably say we're somewhere in between. I think we're doing okay. We're not in a terrible position, like you say. We're a couple of points outside the playoffs, 4 points off the top 3. And I think the vibe would probably be a little bit more positive. Weird as it sounds, if we'd been a little bit more inconsistent. I think it's the fact that we had such a good run and then such a bad run that's made it feel quite dramatic. Whereas if we were was winning 1, losing 1, we'd look at that and go, well, we're not far off. We've got players to come back. We're doing okay. So in the grand scheme of things, I think as the league table sits, I'm not too concerned. We're there or thereabouts. If we were sitting second right now, it wouldn't have meant that we're guaranteed to go up. It's going to change a lot over the course of the season. I do agree with Jack that the issue I've got is that it does look very much like last season. We've got the joint best defence in the top half, which is great, not too dissimilar to last season, but we've got the lowest goals scored in the top half. It's the same old story. We've got some good foundations there, but like we've said for the last 3 years now, unless we can start scoring goals more often than we do, we're going to struggle to make the top 6 or top 7, should I say? Because it was great that we finally got that win under our belt last week in the Port Vale game. But you look at it and say it's the only shot on target we had all game. We've not been keeping a lot of clean sheets recently. So whilst it was great, we finally picked up them 3 points. If we're being brutally honest, if we only have a shot on target every week, more weeks than not, we're not going to win.
I would totally agree. And we had this discussion in the WhatsApp group, and I know Jack was, quite vocal in saying that it wasn't a good performance. And I totally understood that. But I think we also deserve credit for the fact that because we'd been so poor and the confidence would have been, fairly low, I thought we just needed some credit because we've battered them. Let's be honest. Social media has been awash with people, the players, the management, the coaching staff over the last few weeks, and rightly so in some cases. I think some of it goes too far and some of it's unjustified. But I thought they deserve credit for the fact that they stayed in a game. Because I said on the match day review with Reese, the other Reese, you get to the last 10 minutes and we could have gone fine. We'll take the point. 0-0. It's not a bad result against top of the league. They've not lost since the 31st of August. But at least we had the wherewithal to go, no, let's be brave enough. Let's not just settle and let's go and win the football match. So I thought they deserve credit in that sense. But I totally agree with what Jack said. If we play like that for the remaining 31 games, we're not going to win enough points to get us anywhere near we want to be. But I just thought after the run, there were some positives to take, and I thought we took them into the Stevenage game as well. I know it's a competition that nobody likes, but I thought that was a fairly decent performance with a width of a post from going 2-0 up, and that's probably a completely different finish, but such is life. But no, where do you stand on that second question then, Jack? Somewhere where we need to be, underachieving or overachieving?
I think we're mildly underachieving, mate, to be honest. I think the mitigation is the injuries. I know we're going to come on to that probably in more depth, but we have had a ton of injuries, and the players, broadly speaking, that we've had to pick from have been a lot of the ones that were there last year that left us in the same position. So I think we probably are underachieving based on the business we've done, but the mitigation is that we've not had many players out that we would have hoped, and there's been some that just haven't performed to the level we'd like them to have done. So I think mildly underachieving. The thing for me, one of the most frustrating things is, you look at Port Vale. A lot of their fans on X have basically said that was an outlier and they've not played like that most of the season. But if that's the team that's top of the league is there for the taking. It's so frustrating for me. It's one of those where you just look at it and think, we just need to put a run together for a month or two, the opposites of the one we've just done. And you're broadly there, really, aren't you, to be honest? Like the top 3 in League 2 is easier to get out of than say the National League or League 1. It's one of those where it really is there for the taking for me. And but we said similar at the same time last year. I don't envy Bonner at the moment in terms of the squad he's got in front of him, not necessarily based on attributes, although we'll come on to that. But for me, it's mentality. It's just mentality for me. And I'm a broken record, mate, but just I feel like the intensity has got a lot better under Bonner, especially at the start of the season. The first few games, I thought we was excellent, and we really took the game to teams. And we seem to try and do that from the off, to be fair, in most games under him. But it does peter out very easily. And for me, it's one of those where you just think, like, how many managers do we need to go through potentially? Because there's a lot of people calling for him to go the last few weeks, where you just think, he's not helped himself in this period. Undoubtedly, I'm not suggesting that losing 5 and drawing 1 is good, and that was good management, especially the Swindon game. But for me, mate, I just don't see. I said it on X. I don't see what happens if we get rid of him. Are these players who I think are half-assed? I've said it for a year and a half roundabouts. Are they going to suddenly turn into world beaters under another manager? Of which the only one I would have probably taken is Ainsworth, who's just got another job today.
Oh, was he?
He's got the Shrewsbury job.
Oh, okay.
I don't see where we would change things, mate, in terms of management. I just don't see the point of doing it. I don't see how we're going to randomly start becoming this amazing team if we change manager again. I feel like he needs time to bed in, get people back from injury, and start really putting his ideas into practice.
No, and again, it comes back to we don't want to become that club, do we? I know there was murmurings about being Watford of League Two, but we're nowhere near that, and we don't want to become that, do we, Reece? And I think there would be a risk now if we were to get rid of Mark Bonner. That'd be what 4 managers, included an interim, in a 13-month period would be. It just doesn't work. But the thing is, like Jack said, we had that run, 5 losses and a draw, and then we win 1, and we're suddenly still 8th. So it tells you to almost caveat what Jack said a little bit, and like he's mentioned, we're going to talk about player mentality a little bit, but we've had that horrific run, yet we're still only 1 point off 7th, 3 points off 3rd, 4 points off 3rd, and 7 off top. So it shows you that this group of players and this manager were very good at the start of the season, from start of August to end of September. And like Mark Bonner said, when we were top of the league after beating Barrow, he wasn't the best manager in the division. Not winning in 6 doesn't make him the worst manager in the division either, does it?
No, and you'd like to think that, God forbid, that run that we've just ended will be the worst run of form we have all season. I'd like to think we're not going to have one worse. So like you say, we've come out of that and we're still not a million miles away from where we want to be. Do we want to play better? Yes. Do we want to create more chances? Yes. But, I've seen over the last few weeks, I see people saying that we're a lot worse under Bonner than what we were last season, which is nonsense. It was much of the same. I'm still behind him. Wouldn't want to see us part of him anytime soon. I think the fact that this is our 3rd manager in sort of 12 months, like we've sat here now and spoken about that the issues in our team are still exactly the same as under Clements and under Harris, would suggest to me that, but for the first 2 managers, you can sort of say, well, maybe it's their problem. But then by the time you get to manager number 3 and the same issues are still there, I think you have to then sort of start turning the needle to the realization that perhaps it weren't the managers that are the issue, without wanting to go on about him. You only have to look at what Harris is doing with Millwall at the moment. Clements is not really any worse off than where we are at the moment with Barrow. So they're clearly not bad managers, the same way that Bonner's not a bad manager. He's won a promotion from this league before. And, the owners made that bold call in the summer to get rid of Clements and pick Bonner. So I think they have to back him now. They have to stick with him. And I think they will. I think he'll be here all season. I think it's fair that he gets the whole season. And then see where we end up from there. There are things that I really like about him. There are things that I question about him at times. I don't think his use of his bench and his tactics are particularly good when we're losing in games. I think he starts to panic a little bit and tends to just sort of throw forwards on for the sake of doing it. But when he treats a game like he did Saturday, we're at 0-0, he made some really good changes and got us a result. So we can do it. I don't know if it's just a sort of where we were so desperate for a result, we'd lost sort of 5-6 games on the spin, that he did just become a little bit desperate, sort of just trying to chase goals by throwing attacks on the pitch. I don't know, but in the main, I still think he's the right man for us. It was good to see him show a bit of raw emotion after that win at the weekend. I suspect that was a big weight lifted off his shoulders. He probably did start to feel the pressure, because whether he says in the media that he does or he doesn't, we know he's on Twitter. He posted after the game Saturday, didn't he? So he probably does see some of the stuff that's said. So no, hopefully, regardless of how it come about, that win last week can sort of reignite some confidence into the team, and from now on we'll go on an improved run of form. Because like I say, we can't have a run as bad as the one we've just ended, surely.
No, you'd like to think that's it, and I'd rather have it 2 months into the season than a month out from the end, when the business ends about and the pressure really is cranked up in terms of teams trying to get away from where they don't want to be or trying to get where they do want to be. We started talking about Mark Bonner, so that's the next subject. Let's carry on with that. I've written down could do nothing or very little wrong on our last episode. It was a very good start to the season. Again, like we speak about him and the players, not to repeat myself, but the only loss was against Doncaster in that first period of the season. I think the first 3 games after we last recorded, we beat Tranmere 3-0, Notts County 1-0, and Barrow 2-0. So we can react to sticky situations. My concern is if that 1 defeat becomes 2, then we suddenly look like a team that doesn't know how to play football. But so there's definitely different things that point to both sides of the argument, I think. But you've already said, Jack, he's still the man for the job. You've said it, Reece, and I certainly don't think we can even be looking at it. The thing is, if, like someone said, if the results had been slightly different, like if we'd lost at Notts County but beaten Crewe or something like that, no one bats an eyelid. It's just because of the fact that it came in one group of games where we looked very poor, having looked half decent for the first 6, that I think people have sort of not overreacted, or maybe overreacted. Some might have done, but we can't change it now, can we? It's all about moving forward now.
No, I agree, mate. I think he is a little bit lucky in some sense, though, because, you know, as Reece said, Clements came after Harris, and in some people's eyes, I'm not naming you, but you are one of them, and there was plenty of other people.
I still think it was the wrong decision.
Yeah, and I do as well, actually, to be fair. But it was after the Lord Mayor show for him a little bit, so he had the unfortunate situation of coming in where people thought, it's the wrong decision, and on the other side, people thought, no, it's a good decision. We're going to get better now, and we never did. And I think Bonner's now in the scenario where people are realizing maybe it's not the managers, and it would be the third person to have been sacked. So I think the owners are probably in that position where they can't twist at this point because they just look silly now, potentially, if they do it again. So he is lucky in that sense. And let's be honest, if we were sat here and we'd had this start to the season and Clements was still our manager, we'd be calling him for him to go. Let's be brutally honest. We would be doing so, wouldn't we? So he is lucky in that sense that he's only had 3 or 4 months in the job. But at the same time, that's the mitigation for me, as well as the injuries. You can't sack someone after 3 or 4 months. Even Clement's got 6, If we get to January and we're nowhere near the playoffs, then maybe there's another decision to be made. But I do agree with Reece that we should give him the season. I really do feel that giving managers so little time, and I said it about Clements, mate. I know a lot of people were happy he went, but I thought 6 months was too little for him for the same reasons. So, and for the same reasons, I think it's mainly on the players. So I've held the same line across the whole time, to be brutally honest, mate. So I feel sorry for him, to be honest, and as I did for the other 2.
Reece?
No, I can't disagree with what Jack said. It's an interesting point that had Clement still been in here now, what would the mindset be? You probably are right, to be fair. But I suppose if he'd have had, it would have then been, he'd have been approaching a year. It would have been about a year by now, wouldn't it? If he
literally, his first game was FA Cup first round, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I suppose the caveat to that is that Clements, when he come in, didn't have a pre-season. Bonner come in with all that time. But yeah, I just can't get away from the injury situation. And I appreciate, the argument people make that every team has them. Of course they do, but we've missed some important players at times for big chunks of the season as well. And even people that we didn't expect, we thought Lapsley wouldn't even be here at the start of the season. The season starts, he has to play because we have no other option. He was probably our best player for the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
And then we lose him. We look at Little, we lose him. Andrews, we've seen in the last couple of weeks the impact he can have in short amounts of time on the pitch. We've already been able to see him. Obviously, Dak as well, which is obviously a completely different situation. But, we lost Masterson for, the first 2.5 months of the season.
Played opening day and then we didn't see him for ages, did we? Yeah.
Both keepers have been injured for various points. So, whilst every team does have their injury issues, obviously we signed Aaron Rowe, brand new pacey winger at the start of the season. We've not seen him. So every team suffers.
Ethan Coleman didn't have a pre-season. He was player's player, like you say. There's been loads. Nevitt, another one.
Yeah, it's just been endless. It has been endless, and obviously we're seeing it now that we think we're getting somewhere, and then Little pulls up at the weekend, and we lose him for a few weeks. So it is hard to see sort of light at the end of the tunnel with that at the moment. Hopefully, not playing this weekend gives us a bit of leeway and a bit of opportunity that for Harrogate next week we might have a couple back, and then it might start to look a bit more healthy. Because I don't think it's unfair to say that, despite the fact you've said we're 33% of the way through the season, I'd probably argue that not once has Mark Bonner had his strongest 11 on the football pitch yet.
I think I think this league's easier than last year's is probably the other consideration, which hopefully in part means it's easier for us, but it also means that maybe we should be doing better. Because you look at Wrexham, Stockport, there's some Mansfield. They were some strong teams last season, mate. I can't see too many this year that at the start of the season I'd be particularly worried about in the same way as them. I think that the frustrating thing for me, and I'd say this of Clements, to be honest, I wouldn't say it so much of Harris, but with both Clements and Bonner, I feel like they kind of overcomplicate League Two a little bit. And I'm saying that when Bonner's got a league promotion under his name. But he played two up front. So this was going to be my point that, for me, the things that have always worked in League Two, and we're going back to the 90s and early 2010s, which may not work in this day and age, but what I feel seeped into lower league football, and I'm very underqualified to be slating him, but it feels like a lot of League Two managers try to make their teams into the League Two of Man City. I feel like this overbearance on possession football and playing out from the back and technical players in League Two doesn't always necessarily work for me. For my money, I feel like the centre backs you have should be giants, or strong lads, leaders. If you look back over the course of time with us, when we've got promoted out of this league, they've been that. You look at the Port Vale lads the other day. I know one of them weren't great, but they were giants at the back. I want energetic box-to-box midfielders. I want pacey wingers, and I want two men up front, a big man and a small man. And I feel like League Two is overcomplicated far too much. So I don't think he helps himself in that regard because he consistently is playing one up top, which for me doesn't necessarily work. And that only really works when you've got someone who's dynamic to be able to do a number of different roles. And I don't think we've got anyone in our squad that is that person. So I think his insistence on playing one up front is not helping him.
Has he done that, or has he played? I think he's played two up top in the last three, hasn't he?
He's changed it. Yes,
Yeah,
so he recognised his mistake.
Yeah, which is a good thing, like you say, because you've not just gone through a whole season thinking it's going to work with no plan B. Yeah, but he played it at Swindon, didn't he? He's played it at Blackpool, Port Vale, I think. Yeah, so again, it might be needs must and personnel available that's almost forced him into it, but sometimes you just stumble it. One interesting point I read on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted to put it to you two, was I don't know if you follow him, Stevenage fan called Reece Donnelly, who's quite clued up on lower league football, I think it's fair to say. And he put a post out a few weeks ago saying that he got shot down by Stevenage fans when Bonner was seemingly linked to their job at some point in the last couple of years. And he said he wasn't a fan because he feels that Mark Bonner wants all of his players to be very good at everything. And then it means that they struggle. So they almost become the equivalent of the jack of all trades. And then they don't have an identity or a style of play. Would you say at times there's been a case for that to be proved correct? I'm just thinking the Blackpool game, back to your point, Reece, where, and I totally agree, we ended up with like 4 or 5 strikers / wingers attacking players on the pitch, but we were still playing like wing backs. I think we ended up with Bode at wing back and Clark, and then we just had about 3 or 4 centre forwards. And ironically, we then didn't put one ball into the box for that Blackpool game. That was one that stood out for me in terms of his mismanagement of substitutions. But what would you make of them comments that Reece, the Stevenage fan, has made?
It's an interesting one. I suppose even if look at someone like maybe Wakeling, for example, he started the season, he was playing as a lone striker. I think at times we've seen him from wide. I think there was a game he come on at fullback. So yeah, maybe there is an argument to be made that for not, I don't mean for all of them, but maybe for some of the players that he's trying to get them to fill too many roles over what is still quite a short space of time in the season, and maybe it can have an effect on performance levels. It's an interesting point. We're seeing it with Nolan now, is that he's starting to come on in games where we're not playing sort of natural wingers now because we're playing with wing backs. He's coming on in more central areas, and it's a really tough one because one of the big plus points we've made about Robin McKenzie over the years is that he can go and do a job anywhere, and you can never have too many players like that. But I think also, you don't want to be moving too many of your squad around too often, because I think in the end you will suffer from that. But again, the caveat to that is that I suspect even if Bonner had wanted to put the same 11 out 2 games running, injury or suspension has probably got in the way of that, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. What Blackpool game, Jack? I just want to touch on that as well. You was at the game?
No, mate, I didn't go to that one. No, gave me a ticket.
I'll have to stay with you then. Reece, was you there?
Was I at Blackpool? No.
Forget that then. There was just a couple of points I wanted to make in that. I didn't know what the system was that day, and I said that on the Match Day Live, and I said it on the review show. It seemed that we had, at one point, it looked like Armani Little was a left wing back, and Jaden Clark at some point was like deep in his left back territory, and then was looking to be a winger. Nolan was playing not as a 10, but not as a winger, almost in that inside channel. And everything just looked very confusing. That was my point. So that's what triggered me to think of this comments from Reese. But let's go to Port Vale then, because you've already said it, Reese, and I totally agree. And I mentioned it on the match day review. I thought he got his substitutions and he got the setup. Forget the performance, because that's on the players. Mark Bonner has to set them up in a certain way and tell them to play in a style that says we're going to give ourselves the best chance of beating X, Y, or Z, which was Port Vale, the league leaders at the weekend. I thought we looked better with two natural wing backs. I think Jaden Clark's wasted that low, even though defensively he's very good for an attacking player. It meant that Hutton could stay high. Max Clark was the one that tucked in and made us more solid defensively without the ball. I thought there was one little tweak as well where we played a 3-1-4 rather than a 3-4-1-2, because Ewan Williams was the one that sat deeper and protected in that first half, and it allowed Little and Dieng to go and press. And then I think when Coleman come on, Williams went and did the Little role. And I thought his substitutes all had an impact in that game. Small impacts, like Johnny Williams kept the ball. Ethan Coleman come on, I thought was very good for 70 minutes, considering his form for the start of the season. Jack Nolan, like we said, could have just taken that throw in or picked it up and gave it to Shad and said lob it into the box, but he had the quick thinking to get Connor Masterson in and get the cross in. Jaden Clark obviously scores the winner, and Josh Andrews come on and helped to see the game out. I thought that was the better side of Mark Bonner and the more clear thinking side of Mark Bonner that we've not seen enough of in recent weeks. Jack.
Sorry, mate. My mum decided to come in the room. I think we've seen the better side of him recently, mate. In recent times, yes. In that game, I think his head's been scrambled a little bit the last few weeks because of how close he probably feels he may have been to the end of his tenure at the club, because of, you know, the history suggests that he's not going to get a load of time here. Whether that proves to be the case, we don't know. But I think for me, I think for the majority of this season, we have been largely mediocre, mainly in away games, I would say. The home games have been decent enough, but I think you can hear it in the tone of his voice and his words that he realises that it needs to change. Like that's the difference for me, I think, with Bonner compared to, say, a Clements. Is I felt like Clements, I think he somewhat recognised that it needed to change, but I never heard the conviction in his voice. And I feel like with Bonner, he is trying to drive standards up. He's saying in interviews where he feels the team are underperforming and what they're doing wrong. So for me, I think, put aside substitutions, I think just general tactics and, you know, understanding of the game, I feel like he at least knows where we're going wrong, which is something you can work with. Whereas maybe I didn't feel that quite the same with Clements. And although I think in the last few weeks, though, a lot of his interviews have been self-preservation, overstating how well we've played when we actually haven't. Like the Port Vale game, he suggested that we were excellent. I don't think we were. I got slated for it from a few on Twitter for the facts of being negative, but I thought it was quite a poor performance, to be honest, mate. But like you said, at the end of the day, a win's a win. The thing that concerns me is standards do need to be better, and I've been saying it for so long. It's just, although he recognises it and he knows where we're going wrong, he's still stuck with the squad he's got for now, you know.
And Reese?
Yeah, it's interesting the point Jack makes about sort of some of his comments in recent times being maybe a little bit overinflated of the way we've played, because he was actually criticised earlier in the season for doing the opposite. I remember when we beat Barrow, he came out and said, great win, obviously we'll take the points, but he thought we could be a lot better than we were that day. And in recent times, I see people have gone back to that comment and criticised him for it, saying, oh, that's how you'll lose players, by saying things like that in the press after we won a game. So it is interesting that sort of, I think Jack's right, probably because he knows pressure will start to build, that his tone has gone from playing down decent performances to now playing up not so good performances. Was interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, and
I think he helped himself after Accrington, mate, as well, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. I think after Accrington, although it's exactly what I would have probably said in the heat of the moment, he said something along the lines of, if you're not good enough, we'll get rid of you, kind of scenario. And I do wonder how bought into him the players are off the back of that comment. But my thinking is a lot of them should be going, not him. So we can't allow the same set of players broadly to get another manager the sack. But I don't think he helped himself with those comments publicly, to be honest. Although I agree with.
Because we always see about keeping that sort of stuff in house and having a slightly different line in the public eye, don't we? And I also get the fact that he has a microphone shoved under his nose about 5 minutes after full time. So you're probably going to say some stuff that you probably wouldn't if you was interviewed the next morning. But nature of the beast and all that type of thing. Interestingly, again though, I've literally only seen the clip. I've not watched the full interview of Ethan Coleman talking after the Stevenage game. It flashed up on Instagram while I was waiting for you two, and he said, because I thought that performance was all right last night, the Stevenage one. I thought we made a few changes. I thought there was plenty more positives than negatives. The goal's an absolute horror show, like from Maxima's point of view. You can't sit here and dress that up, and everyone knows I'm a big fan of Maxima, but that's just not good enough. But yeah, the performance was all right. But Ethan Coleman's come out and said, yeah, we were decent in spells first half, and there was other bits that we need to improve on. And I thought that's really good, because generally you get players come out, generic answers. Whereas he's come out and he's gone, no, we've recognised there were bits of that need to be better. And I think Bonner did again. So I suppose with everything like that, it's just trying to find a balance again, isn't it? Don't mug off the fans and treat them like they're idiots because they can see it with their own eyes. But at the same time, you've got to protect your players in the public eye, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's doing a reasonable balance of that, mate, to be fair. Yeah, I don't listen to his interviews and think he's talking rubbish. To be fair, I said the same with Clements, to be honest. But in the last few weeks, I have felt maybe he's overstating how well they've played, just because of how high he was the other day off the back of the Port Vale win. Like that may have genuinely kept him his job. We don't know. You never know, do you? But no. So I can understand why he was so animated, mate.
Right, let's talk about this squad of footballers then. I gave you, gentlemen, some homework during the day. 4 categories: best player so far, biggest disappointment so far, best surprise, and key moving forward. So we will start with best player of the season so far. I'm going to kick this one off. I've got a fair idea. We might pick, certainly the first one will be the same. And then I think we might have, at least a couple of us have the same one. I would go Armani Little has been our best player this season so far. He's one of them players that you definitely miss when he's not there. Box-to-box energy, good on the ball, wants to move it forward, wants to be progressive, willing to put his foot in. I think he's got that little bit of a dark side to him as well, which you want in that position. So that would be my best player so far. And my close second would be a player that's been deemed non-league, not good enough, awful defensively, awful offensively by some fans, Jayden Clark. I can't argue with the fact that I've now 7 goal contributions this season. I think he's been very, very good on the whole and deserves a lot of praise, and certainly doesn't deserve the stick that he's been getting in some quarters. I will come to you, Jack. Who are your 2?
I wonder who you're referring to there. Best player. Yeah, mate, a Little by an absolute mile, to be honest. Even with the injuries, which tells you probably how well this squad's doing, really. The fact the guy's been out for an extended period, he's probably going to be out again, and he's still player of the year for me by an absolute mile. I think I said it to my mate Tom, who I sit next to, and I said it on X the other day. For me, he's got shades of Hessenthaler of him, and I've said it of a few people in the past. So maybe I go a little bit too early on these sort of things. I said the same with Jeffries a little bit, but Little for me is very Hessenthaler. Box to box, can press teams high, wins the ball off people well, can play a pass, can tackle, pops up with a goal. For me, he is the modern day Hessenthaler, and for me, should be our captain. I've got a diatribe I'm tempted to say about Aimer, which maybe we'll leave for later, but Little's the leader of that team by a mile for me. Aimer isn't the captain, in my opinion. And then the second best player, I probably would say Clark as well, mate. You can't argue with stats, to be honest. I'd be half tempted to say Lapsley, but he's been out injured probably longer than Little has, I dare say now, in total. But it's a toss-up between Lapsley and Clark. And as to Reese's point earlier, it's no surprise maybe where we are in the table that 2 of the best 3 I'm suggesting there have been out for a reasonable amount of time this season.
Yeah, ties in with what we're saying, doesn't it? Reese, I'll come to you.
Yeah, best player Little for me. It's really just mentioned the Hessenthaler thing, Jack. I was just sitting there thinking back to when we were successful in this league before. He gives me Charlie Lee kind of vibes as a player. Like that bit of everything, that bit of bite, good intensity, can pop up with goals here and there. And just, yeah, he's the kind of player that you'd want to epitomise your team. And I do agree with Jack. I think he should be the captain of the team. I appreciate it's not always easy to, especially when you've got a new manager and then a new signing comes in. They've probably not worked together before, to then give someone like that the captaincy after only sort of 6 to 8 weeks of working with him is probably would have been a bold move. But looking at it now, it probably would have been the sensible move. And yeah, the second best player, Jaden Clark's been involved in a very hefty percentage of our goals this season, regardless of whether we think he's the most consistent performer in the world. If he plays like crap for 80 minutes and then scores a winning goal, that's better than someone that might look all right on the eye for 90 minutes, but when you look at their stats over the course of a year, they've actually offered you nothing. Then yeah, it's hard to argue with Jaden. And yeah, I think Jack shout's right. Lapsley, if he'd been fit for longer, and probably throw Mackenzie in there as well. He was really good up until when he got injured.
Yeah, Josh Andrews as well, based on the 25 minutes that we've seen. Moving on, and it's just something that you've said there, Reese. I'd rather have someone who's, not in the game for a while and then scores a winning goal than someone who looks all right for 90 minutes and doesn't actually back that up with numbers. And I'm not a fan of this player, but I've got 2 disappointments so far this season. One, I'll start with then, based on that comment, is Johnny Williams. Again, unfortunately, it's just not worked out for Johnny for whatever reason. He's tidy on the ball, he works hard. But he's got 1 goal and 1 assist this season, which I don't think is good enough for a player of his calibre. And they came on the opening day in the very same game. Since then, it's absolutely nothing. And the other one, again, based on his numbers from last season, is Jack Nolan. I think Jack Nolan's been way off it. Certainly away from home, he's been anonymous. I don't remember a decent away performance from him at all. I think his numbers have helped him out at home a little bit. But for me, that's my 2 disappointments, Jack Nolan and Johnny Williams. Reese?
Yeah, I put Johnny Williams down. There'll be, the guys that sit around me will laugh when they say there's people like John and Owen, because it's now a thing that every home game, when he's on the pitch, it's now my hate watch on Johnny Williams. I just, it's beyond the point of frustration with him now. I just don't see it. Because you say he's got 1 goal, 1 assist this season. I think you could pretty much say that's his contribution in his entire time here, aside from 1 goal at Portsmouth.
I think he got 1 each. And I think he set up the Tom Nichols header against Salford in Clemence's first league game last season. So so it's 2 goals and 2 assists in a season and a third.
Someone that came to us with so much pedigree, the level he played at. He's not old for a professional footballer. He signed for us at 30. It shouldn't necessarily be beyond the point of him being finished. And yeah, I don't see it. If someone that I thought would be sort of an attacking creative midfielder, and that's what we thought we was getting off of his numbers for Swindon, he comes on the pitch and he just sort of seems to drift wide into left back areas to get the ball and then just move it sideways and in effect the game. And I remember in the early days of him being here, Jack used to say that he quite liked him in the sense that he'd work really hard. And nowadays, I don't really see that either. I just think he sort of coasts around the football pitch. He'll touch the ball, he'll fall over a couple of times. He'll give it away quite needlessly at times for someone that's got his clearly quality, given the career he's had. At times, I think he gives the ball away really, really poorly. And yeah, I've said it all the time he's been here, but especially after the way they've been this season as well, it's the same as well. If you had him and Lapsley fit, George Lapsley would play in my team 10 times out of 10 over him, that's for sure.
And your other one?
Jack Nolan. Just off numbers, it's hard to compare him to last season in the sense that we didn't see him play. We can only sort of paint a picture of how he would have been given his numbers. But, especially on that first game of the season, probably a bit like Johnny Williams, he scored a really good goal that first game of the season. We thought, well, here we go. This is what we've signed. This is what we needed. Whereas in reality, at the moment, he just looks like a downgraded version of Mahoney.
Can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with any of your points, gents, to be honest. I think a lot of them have been disappointing, as I felt they have been for the last 18 months. I still think to a certain degree Johnny Williams does have some element of work rate, but it's not enough. It's not enough for the money he's on. I think it's one of those scenarios where I think he's not been injured that much this season. If I could be wrong, and yet he's still not starting, which says a lot.
Really. He's missed a game due to concussion, I think, and that's about it.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
he didn't even come on against Blackpool, did he? He was left on the bench.
No.
So I don't think Bonner's a massive fan, to be
no,
honest.
no. If you're starting Ewan Williams over him, with respect to Ewan Williams, who looks like a decent little player,
Mhm.
your time's probably coming to an end at some point soon. Maybe, I don't know, but for the wages he's on, he's a very big disappointment. Yes, and even if he wasn't on the wages he's likely to be on, he's still a disappointment. So I can't disagree with that, gents. I would say I'd say Jack Nolan as well. To be fair, um, there are a couple of other honourable mentions which I'll say in a second, but I think with Nolan he started a reasonable amount of games, and for me he offers nothing. Nothing. I've seen
I think they
nothing
said
at
on the
all.
commentary last night, just to jump in on the Stevenage game, they said he's been involved in every single match squad in every single competition this season.
Bar the Carlisle goal, which was excellent, he's done for me next to nothing. I mean, he does have a shot from outside the box more than most lads, which I'll give him some credit for. But other than that, I've seen not much in the way of creativity. I've seen nothing in the way really of looking like he's going to score goals. He's got no pace, which isn't on him. You know, he was recruited, which we'll come on to. So I don't think he had the attributes we needed. I think we looked at him and thought, there's a guy who's got this many goals, this many assists. Right, we'll sign him with no clear direction and no clear philosophy of how we want to play football. And when you look at the attributes that were missing last season, I've said it till I'm blue in the face. We do not have pace in this team, and the ones that we have signed that do have pace, one of them would be Aaron Rowe. That's a disappointment because he's injured. I'd say the same with Dak because he's been injured, and I'd say the same with Nevitt because he's been injured. But in the same regard, I don't think Nevitt's been that good when he started either. So I think if we're basing it on value for money and performances, it's probably Nolan and Williams. But Nevitt looks like he could be a big disappointment potentially.
Yeah. One to park and file for later when we actually get him on the green stuff, I suppose. Best surprise of the season, I've gone for Jaden Clark. I think he's gone from being a sort of rotational option, a cut player, to being one of the first names on the team sheet for me. Like, I don't think there's been games where he's not been as good as he has been in other matches, but I think his performance has generally been good enough to warrant the fact that he's our first choice left winger now if we play that system. And I think he works hard enough going both ways to be the left wing back if we're trying to be attacking. Maybe in certain games like we've spoken about, Port Vale, maybe Max Clark starts there. So that would be me. It's difficult to get another best surprise. I know he's only scored in the EFL Trophy, but considering the level he's come from, my second pick would probably be Marcus Wiley. I think he's been decent enough, and I think he's definitely got all the attributes you want from a centre forward, albeit we know he's coming from some way down the pyramid. But there's a lot I like about Marcus Wiley, and I think one of the main things for me is the fact that he doesn't shy away from his job. You could come in and you could play a few games and just take the safe option. But I think he's been very bright in the games that he's seen, and I'd like to see him maybe get a run of games just so we can get a proper judgment on him. I'll come to you, Jack, then for this one. Best surprise.
I mean, I feel like people are going to watch this and think we're just agreeing with each other, but Clark undoubtedly is the best surprise because I thought he would be awful. So, and he's been, even if you don't think he's been great, like some people, you can't argue with the numbers, can you? To be fair, if he doesn't score many goals, yeah, if he doesn't score or assist any goals in the next few months, then fair enough. I can sort of see that maybe he's not the greatest all-round player that you would want in your squad, but you can't argue with the numbers. So did I think he'd have the amount of goals he has now at the start of the season? Absolutely not. So that is a surprise. There's no one else for me really, maybe other than maybe Bode, but then not to jump ahead, maybe, but he for me could be the key moving forward, which was going to be your next question. So I think Bode's been a good surprise on the wing. I think he's the sort of lad that I think we've been crying out for a while, but Bonner doesn't seem to want to play him at the moment, which is a strange one. I feel like in the games at the start of the season, when we really took it to teams, it was when we had Rowe and Bode on the pitch together, bombing down the wings, trying to take people on, which is how I think football should be played personally. That is another criticism I would say of Bonner, is he loves to play inverted wingers, which is another nonsense that's come in from the Premier League for some reason in this division. Get some fast lads on the wings, bombing on, and that's exactly
what. On the outside and cross it from the byline. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
It's absolute nonsense to me, mate. Playing
Although Joe
wingers.
Bode, lots of his good performances have come from the left-hand side. Just to Make us
Yeah,
disagree with ourselves.
but he is still getting to the byline, you know,
Yeah, I know,
and
yeah.
using some pace. And I think a key moving forward in games where we're losing or need a goal could be him personally.
Okay.
And I don't think he's used him enough in the last few weeks when things have gone terribly for us.
Reece, I come to you quickly then. Do you think maybe that Joe Bodé's been a victim of the change of system? Because obviously Bonner in the early part of the campaign saw him as a winger, and that's where he's thrived. And then we've gone to now wing backs, a 10 and 2 strikers. So maybe that's why he's not getting so many minutes.
Yeah, I expect so, because Bonner was quite vocal, wasn't he, that he doesn't see him as much of a centre forward. I can understand why he isn't playing all the time. He's still young. You still see he's very, very raw. You know, there has been times he's come on and looked really, really bright, but in terms of that final piece, there's been no goal contribution from him yet. So I think there's certainly potential there. So, and I do think he's one of them players that, for the time being, may be best off as an impact player, coming off the bench against tired legs, bringing that bit of pace. But I certainly think there's a role there for him. Obviously, he's got competition with the likes of Wiley and Wakeling as well, who's coming a bit more into the fray recently. But no, to go back to your biggest surprise, Clark's obviously the standout, and the only other one, despite the fact he's injured now, is that considering he wasn't expected to be here, Lapsey has probably been quite a good surprise this season, I'd say, given the impact he had in the first sort of 2 months of the campaign.
So that's why I went with Wiley, because I knew you'd go George Lapsley, because I know you're a big fan. I thought, well, at least we've got different answers then anyway. Right, key player moving forward. I've gone for... God, I'll go last this time because it feels like I keep taking the lead. So, Reece, I'll come to you. Oh, go on, Jack. You've got something to
I was going to say, mate, well,
You've already done half of yours
I've
anyway.
done
So
Bodé. I've done Bodé potentially because I feel like we've underutilised him. And I think the natural one is going to be Dak because he's not played a game for us. You know, the key moving forward, potentially the best player in League Two, as long as he can get on the pitch. But he'd also be one of the biggest disappointments because he's not got on the pitch.
Because he's not been on the pitch, yeah. So, yeah, he could be in both categories, to be fair. I've got one the same as Jack, so I'll just get out of the way. I've got Bradley Dack. I know Bonner said it probably won't be till after Christmas that we see him, but he's one of my key players, I think, moving forward. If we've got tight games where you just need a pass or just one moment of magic to unlock a defence, I think he could be that. Reece, I'll come to you.
I think obviously the big one's Andrews, isn't it? I think we've seen that in little spells over the last sort of couple of weeks. That he hasn't had to be on the pitch for massive amounts of time to have a visual impact on our effectiveness as a team, especially in the final third. Scored a really, really good goal last night. Someone, I know it's very cliche, it was like good feet for a big man, but it was a cracking finish last night. And even Saturday, right, he didn't score the goal, but you know, he was there in the box when Clark scored the goal, probably disrupting centre halves. Won 4 or 5 free kicks to help us manage that game at the end. So if we can get him fit, we'll have so much more of a chance. And the other one, I'm going. To be fair, that didn't even cross my mind because I sort of forgot he was here. Probably a slightly weird one considering we kept a load of clean sheets without him at the start of the season. But for me, us having Masterson fit for the rest of the season is a big thing. Maybe it's just me. I have a big trust issue over OG. I think he's never far away from a Rick, which is obviously
nice little back heel back to his keeper last night, wasn't it? Just to give us all a heart attack from the edge of the 6-yard box.
The thing is, we don't. For me, the bloke next to him's exactly the same as well, in my opinion. So you look at Aimer last night. Sorry to interrupt you, mate, but I'm of exactly the same opinion of Aimer. That header last night, or the lack of a header, and then not running back, is appalling from a captain, in my opinion. I honestly do not like the bloke playing for this football club. It's so strange. We've got a guy that's got 400 appearances for the club and he's not considered a club legend by many. I think there's a good reason for that. And it's moments like last night. The guy gets easily beat one-on-one. He doesn't contest well in the air, hoofs everything up front when Bonner's telling him not to. He can organise a back line pretty well, but for me, it doesn't make him a leader. And I just don't see the bloke being the sort of person in the dressing room driving standards. And he's one of the key denominators of this period where he's been the consistent captain, where we've got a half-assed squad with zero intensity. And, you know, we've tried blaming managers enough times. I'm sticking it partly on him now as captain, and I don't think he's good enough as a player anyway, which is going to be completely against what you think, Matt. But that's my opinion on him.
It's interesting you say that,
Yes.
Jack, because I mean, I've not turned this into a aimer sort of hate watch thing. I agree with you on the leadership point of view. I don't think his performance has been too bad over the last couple of years in isolation, but he did a piece on the club website, didn't he? A video, and I did watch it. I just think if this is the captain, I don't feel particularly inspired. You know, it's we've got a really good group of lads down in the changing room. There wasn't a lot about we know this is like you touched on really well, Matt. I've not seen it, but Coleman's sort of saying yesterday that we did some good things, but we know there's areas we can be better as well. I just didn't sort of get that tone from Amer's interview. It was just sort of a bit of a PR stunt that I didn't think was particularly successful.
Right, so to just surprise Jack, then I thought exactly the same from that interview. I thought it was just
I thought, you know what you thought you were going to do then, mate? I thought you were going to say, just for a surprise, here's Max Amer.
I was just going to log off and cry.
Yeah, I thought you were going to bring him into the chat.
No, he's not here. No, I totally agree. That was just a media interview for me. There was nothing in there that sort of made you feel any different about that recent run of form. It was just done as an exercise for me. I'll always come back to the fact that you don't play that amount of games and have that amount of football managers pick you if you're not half decent. But I'm erring towards Armani Little as well being captain. I just think you can just. We love stats. The modern game's based around stats now, and you know, I love goals and assists, and I hate XG and that type of thing. That can stay in the Premier League with VAR, but you also have to look at the eye test. Armani Little on that pitch looks 10 times more a captain than Max Amer. And I'm a big fan of Max Amer. Everybody knows that. But no, I think if we was to change it and they were to swap, and I've got no issue with Max Amer being club captain, experience, number of games, that type of thing, absolutely fine. But I'd have no problem with Armani Little wearing the armband. But then maybe the problem is that Armani Little keeps getting injured and Max Amer seems to be fit all the time. But
even you're talking about Coleman, mate. I mean, he's not been brilliant this season. He probably has been a bit of a disappointment in fairness, but he's had no pre-season.
Mm-hmm.
Even he talks more like a leader than Amer. I think it permeates standards, mate. Personally, I could just be going in on the geezer, and I feel bad because I kind of look like him a little bit. But it's as so do you actually. It'll be like we'd be brothers. But for me, he's not a captain, mate. I haven't rated him as a player for a long time, and last night just I know it's a tin pot game in the grand scheme of things, but challenge for the bloody ball, mate. And then basics, run back, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? Like, honestly, infuriating. And if that's the level of intensity coming from your captain, that's not going to be good for the rest of the season, is it? In league games, if that's the example.
Right, mentality then, because we need to get a move on because I'm conscious that Reese has got to go out in a little while. Jack, I'm going to let you start this one because it's your big bugbear, and I totally get that. And then I'll jump in with Reese and maybe try and give both sides of the coin. But you start this one off because I know it's a huge thing that you've got a problem with.
You say intensity, mate, did you?
Mentality and intensity.
Oh, mentality, excuse me. Yeah, I don't know what more to say from previous episodes, mate, really. I don't know. It's just, I don't get the vibe from any of those players. I say any of them, that's a stretch. From many of them, that they're that bothered about getting out of this league. And I'll go back to Amer. The guy's 32. Does he really care about getting into League One? Maybe not so much. And again, the intensity is not there in enough games for me. Although I feel like attributes are lacking in terms of recruitment, which we can come on to as well. So I think the big byproducts of last season, or the big things for me there was a lack of intensity, and recruitment wasn't done brilliantly. And I don't think either of them. I think they're better this season in terms of recruitment's mildly better than last year, and intensity's mildly better than last year. But it's just still not there enough. And as Reece says, at what point do you look at the managers and say, well, the three of them haven't been able to get a tune out of them? There is a common denominator in all of this, So I don't know I don't know what the answer is, mate, because my answer before was get rid of Harris. My answer before was maybe get rid of Clements will be the right answer. My answer was we need to recruit better players, and we have done that to a certain degree. But I still feel that they're somewhat hamstrung by the fact that recruitment really still hasn't been amazing. You know, we cried out for pace. We haven't signed much of it. And the ones that we have signed, or the one we did sign in Rowe, injured. We said about signing goal scorers. Wiley's non-league, Wakelin's a bit powder puff. Nevitt is injured constantly, and I don't think he's completely up to it. I don't think many of the signings this summer have been brilliant. So I feel sorry for the players and the manager in that regard. You know, in the sense that they've got their hand tied behind their back a little bit attribute wise, but I still don't personally see for 90 minutes all of them playing to the same level of intensity as Armani Little. If we had 11 Armani Littles, we'd win this league.
Reece.
Can't disagree too much, really. I think intensity probably been marginally better this season compared to last season, but even then, I think it's in patches rather than consistently across games. Home games, we tend to start really, really well, especially as we've been in most games coming towards the Rainham. Ironically, we went back to shooting to Rainham at first at the weekend and we won. But yeah, especially when we do that, sort of the first 10 minutes of games, we do look really, really strong. And then in the early games, we was scoring in that period, but then sort of more recently, it seemed like if we didn't score in that period, we'd sort of lose that intensity and run out of ideas quite quickly.
It's almost like if we didn't score within the, sorry, just to jump in, it was almost like if we didn't score in the first 10 minutes of a half, that we went, oh, now what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's shown in away games as well, isn't it? I would say.
Yeah. And with the mentality point, I think it's interesting to sort of comparing. I think there can be comparisons made between when we was on that good run and sort of the bad run. I think Notts County game is a really good case in point. I remember tweeting about it at the end of the day that I thought I'd seen a shift in mentality from the group of players in terms of that willingness and that desire to throw bodies on the line and keep the ball out of our net to keep a clean sheet that day. And then sort of I look at some of the goals we conceded during that bad run, and it's just like a different set of players. Sort of, I think sort of in that first 7-8 games we only got 3 goals in, didn't we? And then we just went through a phase of conceding absolutely dross. And it's not because they're suddenly bad defenders or bad footballers, because it's the same set of players that kept a clean sheets at the start of the season. So somewhere along the line, mentality, whether it's confidence, whether it's just mindset, has to come into that somewhere in the equation, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I always play devil's advocate, so we can get some discussion going. These are the same group of players, like Reece has mentioned, in terms of mindset, that were under the cosh at 2-1, first game of the season against Carlisle, and then found a way to go and score 2 more goals. This was the same set of players that managed to get over the line in a tight game away at Morecambe. To a lesser degree, was rubbish at Fleetwood, but managed to hang on and get a 0-0 draw when I think we'd probably lose that last season. Beat Chesterfield and Tranmere, playing for large periods with 10 men. Even scored 2 extra goals in the Tranmere game, albeit near the end, I get that. Were very good in the game that Reece has mentioned. Went to Notts County, big crowd, scored a goal just before half-time. Didn't look under huge amounts of pressure second half till right at the end. I think that was the game. There was a massive block from Ollie Hawkins, wasn't there? There was all the furore around Jody Jones as well, and that type of thing. Barrow, very comfortable, probably one of our most comfortable performances of the season, and they were top of the league at the time, which comes back to Jack's point about maybe the quality of the league is not as good as it was last season. And then Port Vale, Saturday, again, they weren't at their best, I get that. But so there are lots of examples where we've had to dig in and show a stronger mentality. But the other side of the coin, Jack, I totally get, is there's other games that you've both mentioned where we've just, Grimsby, they just run through the middle of us. We don't compete for 2 balls on the halfway line or give the ball away and concede 2 soft goals. Accrington, we sit back and sit on a lead, lose 2-1. That was coming from an absolute mile off. Newport, we were just... Is that the game where Bonner said we was most dominant of the season? But, I mean, there was no quality, let's be honest. Bradford... Swindon
last minute, yeah. No one picking up their man. I think it's the intensity point as well, mate. I think it's partly mentality. It is partly mentality, because I'm not convinced that they're all completely that bothered about going up. But for me, it's main. I genuinely think if you had 10 outfield players playing with the same energy as Armani Little, we'd be in a position where we'd win the ball more off teams. We'd we'd be first to a tackle, we'd be winning headers more, we'd be driving at teams going forward. And I think for me, that's the main thing, to be honest. The intensity defensively is not too bad because we contain teams well, but going forward, mate, it's still not good enough. And I don't, unless we sign some more players, I don't know what the answer is, and because I don't believe changing the manager is going to be the answer either. I'm convinced that there is a number of people in this squad that need to be let go, and I don't know how easy that's going to be. So he's kind of stuck with what he's got. So he's got to try and his best to get the most out of what he's got here. I just don't think they're asked enough, frankly. I feel like it to a certain degree. I'm maybe being a bit reactionary, but this has been going on for 2 years now, so they've got to find it in themselves at some point to change things, and they just aren't doing it. Maybe why they're in League Two, inconsistent players, but I don't see enough heart from that team week to week.
And the weird thing about that, Jack, is for 2 points. Firstly, I think this has to be a mentality point thing. That one of you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure in terms of league games this season, we haven't actually scored a goal yet. We've been behind at the game, have we?
Which is a running theme. I don't think so.
No,
and secondly,
we've lost 6 games, haven't we? We lost 4 conceding first and didn't score in the game, and then we lost Accrington and Bradford taking the lead. Yeah,
from the lead. Yeah. Obviously, Jack mentioned sort of the lack of attacking intensity and stuff as well, which I don't disagree with. But then the thing that makes it even more of a sort of a mystery and more frustrating is that if you look at actually the front lines we're putting out now, they're generally players that weren't here last season. You think Clark didn't play an awful lot last season. Nolan's new. Wakelim, Wiley, Nevitt.
Bodie.
An awful lot to do. Yeah. So it's just sort of a different set of attackers, yet the same problems, which then makes you think, well, actually, are the attackers crap? Or is it the fact that there is something fundamentally wrong with the players we've got in terms of building out from the back or playing forwards, or midfielders haven't got the right attributes to get on the football and play, which admittedly I think has looked better since Ewan Williams has come into the team because, he's been good the last couple of games. I don't think he's a defensive midfielder. I don't think he's got an awfully great defensive bone, but he sits in front of that back four and he wants to take responsibility. He wants to get on the football and he wants to get us playing. And I think that's what we need more of in the team. And if we can have a bit more of that, like Jack says, if we can get that back eventually, I think Mackenzie's good in that regard as well. Maybe the front players might start to look a little bit better. Because, we've had how many different forwards? Bond, Nichols, Nolan, Rowe, Naderson, who've all just produced the same level of crap. Yeah. So at some point, again, it's a bit like the managers. It's that these can't all be bad players. Something else somewhere has to be the issue at some point along the line.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And then also you could spread that further and say, then maybe it's not recruitment's fault as well. And maybe we are going back to player mentality and intensity then. Because you can't say that Kenny Jackett, Andy Hessenthaler, Joe Comber, whoever has signed, every single player that we've signed is a poor player. Because you're not in the game for that long and you don't have a managerial career that Kenny Jackett had for that long if you don't know what you're doing. But we'll get to that in a sec. Injuries is obviously one massive part of our season so far. I think we've probably got half a squad that's missed more games than they've actually played if you go through it in number order. Like you said, Reece, we've had to use 3 goalkeepers this season already. Conor Masterson missed loads of games at the start of the season. Ethan Coleman didn't have a pre-season. Armani Little's had 2 spells out. Josh Andrews was still building him up. Aaron Rowe we've not seen for 2 months. Robbie McKenzie's had 2 big spells out. Nevitt, Dak, Turner's had a big spell out. Lapsley's out injured at the moment, and Timmy Dieng missed about 6 weeks, I think, with a knee problem. So that's a lot of good players for the level on paper. First question. Do you 2 recall anything like this in your time supporting Gills?
I remember there was a bad one under Evans, wasn't there, where he had to play Aimer up front.
The relegation season, yeah.
And there was one under Hessenthaler, I can remember, in the Championship where he had a ton of players out. So, and in both examples, we underperformed. Mm-hmm. So yes, I can think of worse seasons, mate, but this is up there. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Which the fact we're 8th with these injuries, mate, I do that's why, you know, as a lot of people I know who are like, no, Bonner's not the right man for the job. He's tactically inept. Blah 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 blah. Like I feel it's too soon to be saying that, and the injuries are a mitigating factor here. They have to be. So I feel sorry for him in that regard, mate. And the unfortunate thing for him is quite a lot of the better players in this squad have been the ones that have got injured.
Yeah, your game changers, essentially. Like you say, your Dacks, your Lapsleys, your Andrews, your Nevitts, your Rose with his pace and that type of thing. Reece, what do you think it's down to? I mean, we're only surmising. I get that entirely because we're not privy to what goes on behind the scenes. But there has to be a reason why it's continually happening. I mean, we don't know. They're not all muscular. They're not all impacts. But it's certainly like Reece. Jack's given 2 examples going back to the championship. So that's 3 seasons we're looking at in a 20-year span. It's something slightly awry, isn't there, for it to be this extreme? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if we group together people like Dak, Andrews, Lapsley, McKenzie, I'd even go as far as saying generally quite prone to picking up injuries. Especially sort of McKenzie and Lapsley in their time here. They've had a fair few. So I suppose if you've got a sort of 22, 23 man squad, you already know that there's 4 that are going to quite regularly pick up bits and pieces. It is a little bit concerning that there are quite a few that are to do with conditioning or muscular issues. I think Hutton's missed a couple of games because of hamstrings, Rose hamstrings, Little's hamstrings.
Dak's hamstring.
And they're the type of injuries that can generally be traced back towards methods or things that may or may not be being done in training. You know, the contact injuries, like Hawkins's foot, for example, Turner's broken wrist or whatever he had. Yeah. They're part and parcel of the game, but we have had a fair few. Like I say, the injury one's been that bad is that we've had a spread of both, but I don't know if the amount of muscle injuries is perhaps a little bit abnormally high for what you'd like to think at this stage of the season anyway. If it happens sort of 6 months into the season, you'd get it a little bit more. But in the grand scheme of things, we still haven't played an awful lot of games yet. So it is a little bit of a concern that, you know, and Bonner keeps going about himself, is that he talks about how great it will be if we had everyone to pick from. But he says himself that in reality, the chance of that ever happening are actually quite remote. And it is a little bit of a worry that we could go the whole season and not once actually see our best 11 players play together on the pitch, because it seems like there's always going to be at least one of them unavailable.
Maybe the reason why, maybe the reason why the muscle injuries are coming in training is because they're working harder than they were used to.
That, or we're having to rush people back half fit because we're so low on numbers. That's potentially a factor as well, to sort of to take away the sort of. That sounded like maybe I was questioning what Bonner does in training, but there's also that element of maybe where, especially in the first few weeks, we were so short. He was able to say there was that incident with Turner as well, where we said he shouldn't have played up at Bradford. Morris was out. Bonner probably went to Jake. Are you all right? He probably went, yeah. Probably wasn't, but was willing to go and do the job. And maybe we've had a few like that this season that have then come back to bite us because they've had reoccurring issues.
The biggest concern is that I hope is not correct, is that maybe we have seen our best 11 if we can't get everybody fit as well. But time will tell. Anyway, enough about injuries. A couple of bits of other business, departures, before we start wrapping up this one. The first one I don't want to spend a lot of time on. It's our dear old friend Uncle Paul again. Was voted off at a shareholders meeting in October before the latest fans forum. Still not going quietly, is he, Jack? I think it's fair to say. He's been on the telly, he's had people in his living room, he's been in the newspaper. Poor Paul. I think I said on X or to someone at a game recently, he's got to be the most unfortunate businessman in the history of the world, because everyone that he tries to do business with is out to get him or out to stitch him up. It's never his fault.
No, oh mate, I could spend a half hour on this, to be honest.
Well, you can't.
I don't really want to speak about him, mate, in all fairness, because he's old news, but I'm delighted he's been voted off. I think clearly the Gallinsons have seen what he's like very quickly. The fact he's gone crying to the media and going to court supposedly suggests he has zero concern for the club. he says otherwise is bullshit, in my opinion.
You've literally written mine. That's what I've written down. If he cares about the club as much as he keeps saying he does, just go quietly and let it continue to thrive.
He could have sailed off into the distance, mate, with his money, be somewhat remembered for the good times. All he'll be known now is a stain on the football club. Good riddance to him. Don't come back. No one wants you. If you think you're that liked and well liked within the football club, come to the factory for one game, mate, and see how liked you actually are. And the fact that he says that ex-employee or employees weren't scared of him or felt uneasy is absolute bollocks as well, by the way, because I know people that have worked for the club that will tell me the complete opposite. You couldn't wear brown shoes. You had to wear Gillingham ties all the time. I mean, these are things that maybe you look at and think, well, yeah, professional standards, but to be scared of him, you know, he's not the greatest thing in the world, is it? And the bloke only cares for himself, really. He's absolutely desperate to stay relevant, and the moment that it's away from him, he can't handle it. He's got middle child syndrome. I've said it before on X. He's like a pound shot Vince McMahon. If anyone watches the WWF, literally the same personality. Bit of a narcissist.
WWE for the kids. Reese, anything to add? I think Jack's
without the sexual allegations, I should add, yeah. Vince McMahon has, yeah.
Save the channel. Save the channel. Reese, anything to add? I think Jack's covered it all. WWE, WWF, and sexual harassment and everything all in one there.
Yeah, there's not too much more I can add to that. There was one thing that he sort of doing his woe me pieces that really irked me was the way he was going, that he was concerned about what the Gallinsons are doing because he was questioning them over sort of the lack of infrastructure developments and pre-season tours. No, first thought was, well, those pre-season tours were so regular under you, weren't they? That like,
yeah. Where have we been? I think we went to Ireland when Pennant was in charge, and the last one was probably Latuke, weren't it?
Yeah, they've done lots around the club. The Gallinsons, may has to be said. Scally did absolutely nothing. The only thing they still haven't done is the self-service pumps. Come on.
We were so close.
So close.
Good. Yeah. I'm disappointed. I don't know whether I'm more disappointed that it took that long or I'm disappointed that we nearly got to full time without actually getting it mentioned.
No, I only remembered halfway through, to be honest.
Second departure was announced on Monday, and I think the first thing to say is we wish this man all the best because he's had to resign with immediate effect due to ill health, and that is Kenny Jackett, our director of football, has stepped down. Seems that according to the reports and the statements the club put out, that he's not been around the football club for a good number of months, so we don't know how much he had in terms of an input over the summer transfer business. But I think the first thing we say is all the best to Kenny. We don't know what the illness is. Fingers crossed it's nothing too serious and he makes a full and swift recovery. But we do have to have a quick look at his time in charge. I've written down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 27 players, I believe we've bought in, if I've got that correct. If I've missed anyone, I do apologise. In his time,
I'd say most of them unsuccessful, mate, broadly. Although that being said, you know, part of it's down to Hess as well. He's the guy that's the scout. I said before, I think earlier in the episode, that I feel like that no identity is kind of. I echo your sentiments, by the way. I hope he does get better. I think my notes prior to this that I'd put together the other day before he left were that I was hoping he would leave at some point, but not under the circumstances clearly that have come about. I think, look, he's overseen quite a lot of players coming in with no real identity to how we should be playing as a football club. I feel like we've signed a number of names, and then we've diverged from names to one-hit wonders. You know, Nevitt's had one good season, Nolan's had one good season. We've not really looked at the attributes we need. We've just gone, right, they're good on paper and they've had one good season. So I don't think he's overseen great transfer windows. I think the first one was good, but the baseline was horrendous that we started from anyway, of 7 goals.
I was going to say that you have to look at it, the aim against the result, don't you, to a degree? And I'd say, yeah, I'd agree the first one was probably the best one. We were bottom of the league. If you look at the players that came in, Reese, Tom Nichols, Tim Dieng, Ollie Hawkins, Glenn Morris, George Lapsley, Jaden Clark and Ethan Coleman were probably ones for the future that are now thriving in the first team. But the others, I think it's fair to say, all played a huge part in dragging us away from the bottom of the league and keeping us in League Two.
Yeah, but very successful for the initial job they come in to do. But I suspect that they were also signed with a vision of trying to help us to then kick on and get out the league in the following seasons, which obviously we've not been able to do yet, and the impact of sort of the more experienced ones that you've listed has probably not been what would have hoped. Lapsley this season has contributed a fair bit, but obviously likes of Hawkins, DN, have we had enough from them? Probably not. So yeah, it's probably been quite a mixed bag in terms of players that we've brought in while he's
I'd
been
say the
here.
best two from that window, ironically now, are probably the two that weren't bought for the here and now at the time, and that's Ethan Coleman and Jaden Clark.
Yeah,
I think for me, mate, as well, getting rid of Harris, wrong decision. Bringing Clements in, probably the wrong decision, but he shouldn't have had to have made the change and brought someone in anyway. Getting rid of Clements, maybe the wrong decision, given where we are. But Bonner, bringing him in, looks like it's an okay decision, but we can't say it's a good decision at the moment based on where we are and the recent run we've been on. And
do we think we have to give it time, and then that answers both of them questions, Clements and Bonner?
Yeah, I would say so, mate. But I said it on the last episode, I would have given it Ainsworth. He's gone obviously to Shrewsbury now, so I feel like the hire wasn't the best of the bunch available. So I don't think he's done a great job, mate. I wish the bloke well. I hope he gets better, but I am somewhat glad he's left, to be honest.
Yeah, I put a tweet up because I just thought people didn't read the statement on Monday. Like, it's not hard to click the statement and read the reasons rather than just slagging him off and quote tweeting him before you've actually looked at the reasons.
Yeah.
I can't see why the club would put out a statement and put Kenny Jackett's heel was the headline. You don't do that type of thing. You're not a rag or a tabloid, that type of thing. So I thought people just sort of just been a bit more tactful and read the statement before putting their opinions. But yeah, I think it's fair to say it's been a mixed bag. Certainly the first one was probably the best one. If you look into the summer of 2023, we've already discussed Johnny Williams been massively underwhelming. I think Max Clark's been all right. Shadowgie's been all right. Scott Malone was all right. Ashley Nadesan, failure. Ironically, I'd say the best signing that we made in that window was the only one that we didn't actually get to keep, and that was Connor Mahoney from summer 2023.
And that was a Harris signing, mate, not a Jackett signing.
Yeah, because I don't think he comes same with Connor Masterson. I don't think we get Connor Masterson on a permanent if Neil Harris wasn't the manager at the time. Yeah. So then fast forward to quickly before we say full time. I think Ramo Hutton, is an upgrade at right back, even though I wasn't dead against Shay Alexander playing at the time, but I think Ramo Hutton's definitely an upgrade. And then Josh Andrews, I don't think you can tell. I suppose you have to say failure at the moment because he's just not played enough for a six-figure fee. Hurtado got injured. Josh Walker was a failure. I suppose we have to give it till the end of the season, Reece, don't we, before we judge any of this summer's transfer business, really?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably a bit too early at the moment, isn't it? Jury's still out on quite a few, especially people like Wiley, sort of more of a longer term project, far too early to really pass too much judgment.
Absolutely. Right, gentlemen, any other business before we start wrapping this one up?
Nope.
Don't think so, mate.
Right.
I still think we should bring the Brian Moore stand back, but that's been covered before.
Got them both in. Brian Moore stand, self-service pumps. Wouldn't be Gills in the pub without them.
You said that's been covered before. The irony is actually...
It actually is covered now. Yeah. Well done to the commercial team, to be fair. Getting someone to sponsor that is some effort, actually.
The club tweeted the other day about 100% effort, 100% record under shower seal. Like, Christ, it's been one match.
Very good.
Anyway, Gills fans, if you are still watching, as always, we do appreciate you listening to us ramble on, moan, criticise constructively, praise where necessary, and talk about self-service pumps. Please keep hitting like, please keep pressing subscribe. We will be back next week because we do have no fixture this coming weekend due to international call-ups for the very glamorous Walsall. So yeah, we'll be back next week looking ahead to Harrogate, but until then, up the Gills.